came out in my job interview, and I had a friend who was not out. She said, "I hope you don't tell anybody that you're a lesbian." I'm like, too late. But I also was the person who got in here to do domestic partner benefits by signing up my spouse. Not at that time, but my partner. And so that was 1991. And I'm just curious, and I had expected NPR to just be progressive and have them. No way. I'm just curious about the benefits for all of us. Does everybody have benefits in your work? Anybody not have benefits in your work? I'm just curious about that. Not? Okay. So there's more work to do for this organization, isn't there?
We had union benefits, as I remember.
Well, now. I'm saying now. I'm just curious if they...
I mean, that's what I'm saying, is going forward.
Yeah.
If you have the right to marry in all 50 states, do we really still have a battle for domestic partnership benefits if we can just get married?
Right. Yeah. Things have definitely changed. I'm just curious if there are people that, that are experiencing any kind of barriers in that way professionally.
To get the last
one. Hi, I'm Sue Green, and hearing your stories are great. And from there, I come from the great state of Arizona, where we're not real open and diverse. I was more afraid of being black and the only black person in the newsroom than being someone who was out in black. That was sort of like the double, check mark. But it wasn't until I was much, much older. So I envy those of you who are younger and coming out. I had my 17-year-old nephew came out on Facebook a month ago, and I was like, oh boy, okay, this is going to get interesting. But it's younger and younger, and I really do respect that. But I do, as Jen said, I have a lot of students that would show up and ask, how do I come out in that first job, that second job? And one young woman whose mother told her to wear a skirt, that she had to pretend to be quote unquote a woman. I had another one who called me crying because he was afraid his news director was going to out him, and he didn't have the rights, his protected rights in his state, so they could fire him. What do you say to those young people? How we're all very comfortable, or a lot of us are very comfortable. But what do you say to those young people that, yes, Colorado Springs, I've had several of my students go there, but not every city is like that. What advice do you give to them as they would show up in your office and say, how do I come out in a newsroom that's not very inclusive? As you said, I love that word as well.
I wouldn't be as so arrogant as to give advice to anybody today, but I would say that one of the benefits of the people who are out on the air, particularly the younger people today, and particularly people who are not speaking necessarily to our audience, we set an example, we lay the groundwork, we set a baseline so that other people can see, oh, I'm not the only one. What they do with it, I'll leave for other people to say. But I think that's why it's important for people to be on the air. For the person who said there aren't enough lesbians who are out, we've got to encourage them to be out. We've got to encourage a wide variety of people to be out. When I started on television in Washington, D.C., you're exactly right. Racial diversity was the big thing. And it was a big thing at my station that Max Robinson was a 6 o'clock anchor. So we've come a long way with all of that. And all I think we can do is continue to set the example.
So I'd say be unafraid. And I know that takes a lot of strength and a lot of figuring out things for yourself, but it's 2015. And I told my members of NLGJA last year that to be unafraid, because that's the most important thing right now. You have to stand up for who you are, what you are, the stories in the communities that you want to cover and should be covered. And we have to go into that out of a place of strength and not fear. And so, I don't think you should go in and say, you should figure things out, you should kind of test the waters. I say you got to be authentic, you got to be real. We're journalists, we fight for the truth, we stand by the truth, we should stand by who we are.
I mean, I think it's hard to give
some of this advice can be so situational too. I think you kind of just got to, and the conversations I've had with people is you just kind of got to be you. I was much better at being able to be me when I stopped lying to people. But I want to put a caveat there is I still don't know how relevant it is, you know, that I'm gay as to what I do for a living. I mean, it's a part of who I am, but to me, it's almost like as relevant as the fact that I wear contacts instead of glasses, which as an on-air person, actually I've had more conversations about my glasses and my hair than I have about my personal life with management. So, and maybe that's just I've been fortunate that I've worked in places that were more concerned about my hair. But I think what I tell people is that they've got to be who they are. And if you're in a place where that's not going to let you be who you are, you're not going to like working there anyway. You know, I've been very fortunate that I've also had some amazing people in this industry that have been able to be mentors and friends and supportive when I've struggled with whatever the dilemma has been. And I think what you can tell people is to look at your network, look at your network of peers, look at your network of friends, and look to support there if it's not coming from this or that manager along the way. You know, I've been really fortunate that I've had just wonderful people around me. One of them I get to sit next to right here is John Yang, who was a friend and role model and mentor and for many years when I was a reporter in Washington. And I look around this room and there's a colleague there from Washington who's a big supporter. Dave Brown, I think, is floating around here somewhere, who's been a friend and advocate of mine for a long time. Corpusant was one of the nicest, most welcoming people at CBS when I started. So I mean, those are the stories that I can tell. I think that when you look around, you can find the support, even if it's not from this manager or that manager.
This isn't so much about the newsroom, but I think more about the stories that we cover. I was just thinking back to when I was saying how easy it was for me to come out because I was in New York City, but I have to remember at the same time that there are still parts of New York City where there are plenty of young people who are terrified to come out, and we should still focus on these stories. We shouldn't, because same-sex marriage is legal, think that everything is just great. I mean, there are pockets of the Bronx and of Upper Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn where there are kids who are just terrified that they fear that they're going to lose their families, they're going to be beat up if they come out. I mean, Christopher Street is still a mecca for people in the city who have nowhere else to go because they're struggling with their sexual identity. So I think we need to remember that there are still problems and that we just can't, because sometimes I'm guilty of it myself, looking at things from this kind of white upper middle class perspective, and to realize that the issues extend beyond same-sex marriage and that there are people who are just struggling actually with coming out because of the neighborhoods they live in, that they're not able to.
Can I just follow up just real quick? I just challenge them, everyone who's up there who said, don't be afraid, get mentors, things like that, that the great thing about NLGJA is that we started a lot of student chapters. And that, to me, is something to really be proud of at universities all around. If you're in your city, go, talk to them, be a guest, whatever, so that they can see you as their mentor, someone who's very visible, because these are young people who are getting ready to come out as well, and it might help them. So if you have that, I just say, find those groups and go and get these young people working on our student project. This has got to be amazing being here, So for you guys, I would just say, if you can find them, please do, because they would love to have you come speak with them.
If I could add just one thing, I love our student project. That was one of the first things that I noticed about NLGJA, and it made me so proud to sign up right away and be part of this organization, and that you're starting the mentor program again. Love that. I challenge all of us, because transgender stories are so difficult to tell in so many newsrooms across the country. We're not seeing that transgender people have access to college education because of a number of reasons, race, class, and being transgender. So let's also not just include students, but let's look for ways to mentor and teach trans people in our communities to tell their own stories. Teach them how to use a camera or use their iPhone even, and how to edit and how to publish and elevate their blogs that they're already using, so that they can also become better journalists and tell their stories and help us serve our viewers, our audiences better. As the NLGJA, we could be that kind of leadership organization, and each member could be that kind of leader that reaches out to find transgender people to help them learn how to develop the tools to tell their own stories, rather than relying on people of privilege to deign to pay attention to them when they get murdered or when there's a salacious celebrity story. Let them tell it themselves, just like we are now able to tell our stories.
One point I would just like to stress or pick up from some of the things that were said is people have said, and I think correctly, that sexual orientation is not part of what they're talking about as with journalists. It's, in some sense, no different, maybe the hair or content is probably very related to the way you look. But there's another sense here which is important and which is, I think, very relevant to NLGJA, and Michael, I think, alluded to that, which is when people, young people in particular, are thinking about themselves, the possibilities that they face and the challenges they face when they see the media, which is so much part of our lives, and they see people who look like them, that's a message of possibility. And that's one of the reasons why diversity of gender, diversity of race and ethnicity in the media, in the public mirror, is so critical. We're the invisible minority to a large extent. I mean, every minority in this country has a lot in common, but a lot that is different. And the particular quality of sexual orientation is that it's often not visible. And you can be a gay, lesbian, even trans reporter without the audience knowing that. Well, if that's the case, then what is missing, and this is a challenge you have to, I think about, what is missing is that mirror role model aspect. The message to someone who says, well, look, there is someone who is successful who is like me in that way, and this is a message of possibility. So I would challenge you, and I don't have an answer to how you do this. I mean, certainly as a teacher, I find the same thing, in the university, which is how do you communicate that without becoming, if you like, there's the whole thing about I'm a professional gay or a gay professional. How do you make that part of the message of possibility? It's easy on a campus, believe me. If you're an openly gay faculty member, everyone knows about it. And I think it's easy in many ways in journalism, but it's worth thinking about how you can do that, how you can send that message as well. And certainly it's one of the ways, I think, in which an organization like NLGJA can help people think about that by being part of it, including by making that known to people, certainly in the context of journalism education and journalism schools, to make it visible, because that is an important contribution to the lives of people in society, which you make by being there, but you have to find a way to make it come true and make it realized. I think this panel is demonstrating is it glass half empty or half full? We've got some of both. I don't think it's half empty. It's maybe a third empty or a quarter empty. I think we've come a long way in the last 25 years of this organization. Thanks for participating.